Hello, welcome to the Pit Stop Podcast. I'm Braydon Dowler-Coltman. I'm joined by Jordan Dowler-Coltman. How you doing, Jordan?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. It's been a hot second since we had a little bit of race action. We had a week off. The last race was a back-to-back, the second of a back-to-back in Austria at the Red Bull Ring. We had a pretty fun match with Norris and Verstappen. We'll get into that. And we've got a brand new system for qualifying this upcoming weekend here at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix. So let's get going. Okay, so like I said, the second of a back-to-back, the Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring. We had a dominant performance once again by Max Verstappen, who's proving that he is much more than he was last year, and proving that car that Red Bull's rocking is much faster than it was last year as well. Norris had a really great race. He finished third. We saw Bottas in second, and so we made predictions for 4, 5, and 6. I don't think either of us would have predicted Hamilton in fourth. What were your thoughts on that race?
No, Hamilton struggled a little bit. To be honest with you, though, the real sort of like driver of the week for me was Lando Norris. Just drove the hell out of that McLaren, and even right through from qualifying on, you just knew he had great pace, and it was impressive to see him. He qualified in second, and then was able to just really push it all race long. He struggled a little bit against Hamilton in the middle part of the race there. We had a sort of a funny radio exchange after Lewis had chased him down for a couple laps. He finally passed him. He sort of paid him a compliment on the team radio saying, man, that Lando's a good driver. But Lando was able to get the last lap. He finished on the podium. So good for him. Again, he's the only driver this season so far they got points in every race, and nice to see him back up on the podium. Good to see Bottas back up on the podium in second place. He's really been struggling this year, but he was able to really push his car too, which was good. And Verstappen, you mentioned back-to-backs at the Red Bull Ring, but it was the third in a row, back-to-back weekends. We had a little sort of hat trick, if you will, of races, and Verstappen winning the hat trick. He got all three, so he's pulled away again. Continues to just widen his lead a little bit more on Hamilton for the constructors. I think his lead is about 32 at this point. So
yeah,
even with a win this upcoming week, Hamilton still won't catch him yet. So it's still tight. Obviously, lots to take away from what was a very busy June and early July.
And it's nice to see Ricciardo, pushing a little bit. He finished 7th, not necessarily where he wants to finish, I'm sure, seeing his teammate in Norris finishing on the podium. But are we going to see Ricciardo find his way with McLaren here? Or are they going to, we're kind of getting into the part of the season where, seats are available, things change, like we're seeing with next weekend. We'll talk about, there's going to be a new qualifying feature. What's the future hold for Daniel Ricciardo?
Well, I think they're happy with him at McLaren. He's happy at McLaren, but it's still growing pains. I think, so much is going to change next season because we're getting new cars. We're getting a whole new sort of financial regulation. This was sort of the weird, carryover year, right? They're driving pretty much the same vehicles from last year. So lots of weird things I think are being worked out. However, you look at Lando Norris, he's driving, pretty much the same setup in the other McLaren, and he's definitely having better results. So Ricciardo, I think we'll continue to try to push. As you mentioned, good finish, 7th for him. It's really important for McLaren that he continues to get them valuable points. They'd love him to be getting double-digit points as opposed to, the 4s and the 6s and the 8s down there in the bottom half of the top 10. But, because they're in a fight with Ferrari for third, that's really what their season is going to come down to. They really want to finish third behind Mercedes and Red Bull. Nobody, I think, expects anyone else to be able to get up there other than Ferrari and them at this point. So it's sort of a 2-dog race for the top 2 spots, and it's a 2-dog race for the third spot. And that would mean a lot for McLaren to go back-to-back seasons in third place and help them financially. And so they're definitely hoping Ricciardo can continue to push that McLaren that he's driving.
Yeah. Another notable performance, George Russell. We talked a bit about him last week on the podcast. He finished in 11th and just shy of getting 1 point. Granted, that's huge though. This is a Williams car, and this, this vehicle, and correct me if I'm wrong, this vehicle should not be where it is on the grid by the end of the, if you, and if Williams is, competing for one of those ladder positions in the rankings, Russell's given them a great opportunity to fight for something. When you look at the rest of the standings, Stroll finished 13th. Vettel and the other Aston Martin didn't even finish. The Alfa Romeos are sitting 14, 15 where we usually see them. And George Russell's bound for an upgrade. I guess that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of speculation and rumor about that. But I would also say, and we're going to get to it when we talk about this upcoming weekend, because there's already been some early fireworks from Russell. But I don't want to jump the shark on that. But when you look at last week, he's been qualifying really, really well. And that's because I think that Williams car right now is built for clean air, open space, and he just flat out drives it unbelievably. It's when he gets into traffic that he seems to be struggling, and that's just the engineering of that car. And they're going to be grateful, I think, when this season's done, to be able to move on to a new a couple new pieces of technology and into a new car, because I think Williams is on the right track to start to put the right steps forward. The question will be, will George Russell be there for the journey? Probably not. He's probably, like you said, due for an opportunity with a bigger team, Mercedes most likely. So I think big question marks, but also huge signs of what, just like you should be salivating over how exciting the next couple of years are going to be with George Russell competing with the guys like Lando Norris and Verstappen. The young guys in this field are just so good. I think the next decade of F1 is just set up for some really, really exciting, drivers.
So you mentioned a few things here about the changes coming next season. I think that we should just dive in and talk a little bit about what that means, and if you can explain a little bit what is to come for F1 in the next year, but also the next upcoming years.
Sure. So they just unveiled a couple days ago sort of the prototype for the 2022 car. So obviously every team and every constructor makes modifications and design choices based on what their engineering and their aerodynamics packages and all of those kind of things. They've all got different engines, but the basic design of an F1 car is uniform, to prevent really sort of outlandish, strange ideas. And there is a fun, it can be kind of fun to go down into the archives, and you can find a lot of great videos on YouTube. Even on the F1 page, they've got sort of history of some really weird cars when the rules were a lot less sort of strict about the car design. And there's some really interesting ingenuity and innovation. There's a couple 5-wheel cars where guys in the 70s and 80s were just trying really out of the box stuff. In the modern era of F1,
whoa. Did you say 5 wheels?
Yeah, you got to go and see this stuff.
So what? There's really one in the front.
There's 3 in the front.
It's 3 like in training the wheels.
You just got to go see it. It's hard to explain. Right. They're very strange. They're very concept cars, right. And there was a point in time when the regulations were a lot less stringent, and obviously safety being a big factor, and also just sort of the competitiveness of the sport has increased and changed. And now there's this sort of uniform design. So, I'm not going to go into all of the major changes, but if you go online, you go to the F1 website and you can see that there's some pretty big differences. The couple of the big obvious ones, the front wing has a kind of a new uniform design. We're losing sort of the side pieces of it.
It looks cool. It looks like an arrow.
It does look very cool. Yeah, totally. One of the biggest changes is the wheels and the tires. So it's easy to see if you look at the photographs of them. The Pirelli tires that they're on right now are 13-inch wheels, which means that it's a fatter tire with a smaller diameter for the wheel inside. But coming into 2022, the wheel size will increase to an 18-inch wheel, which means that you'll have a lower profile tire. It'll definitely look cooler, but it's also just going to mean a whole new tire compound. We've had a lot of stuff about that. Totally. The rear wing is a whole new structure. It's a lot more fluid. The floor, I think, is the other part that's really interesting. They're calling it like a 3D floor. So rather than the current F1 car is a flat bottom, designed for pretty standard downforce. But on the next version, the 2022 car, features like a fully shaped underfloor with these sort of air tunnels that are designed to, again, increase downforce, but also have sort of less impact on the cars around them. So one of the things they're really trying to do is prevent the problem we're seeing with Williams, where other cars, airflow is impeding and impacting the cars behind them. So they're not able to follow as closely because they're being so greatly impacted by the turbulent air ahead of them. So the design of this future car, the 2022 car, is designed to try to make the airspace right behind the leading car, more drivable. So the chase car should be able to get closer. We should be able to have more overtakes and more sort of aggressive following. That's definitely something they want to do. All of this is about increasing competitiveness. They're trying really hard to move to a more competitive field. That's been a big thing. The other real big change is the weight of the cars is going up by about 5%. So again, they're 14 kilograms heavier than they were last year or this year, I guess. But with those new tires, it's a lot of factors. Like again, we can get into the nuts and bolts and the technical parts of it, but it's also just easy to go online and look it up. So the bigger point being, big changes coming. The cars are going to look a lot different next year. They're designed to be more aerodynamic and, more importantly, more aerodynamic for the cars around them, trying to create less wind disturbance or air disturbance. And then
they should be
hopefully
faster.
It makes them more competitive. They will be faster. In theory, they should be faster. It should be the biggest upgrade speed-wise in the in the hybrid era. And that would be great for, again, teams that are, the McLarens and the Ferraris and the teams that are just chasing the two fastest cars out there right now. They're going to have more opportunities to start to push and compete, which would be great. So,
and to be clear, because there's F1 and what the organization as a whole does in terms of regulating design, what the car has to be, and there are certain regulations to that. But then within that, each team still has an opportunity to tinker and upgrade parts of that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there's little minor things that have to shift and change depending, let's say, on like engine shape and things. So if you look, for example, at the Aston Martin this season, a lot of that car looks very similar to, let's say, the Mercedes. But when you actually look at like the bodywork right behind the driver, there are these sort of strange bulges on each side, and that's because the engine fits in a slightly different way than it fits on the Mercedes. Or you look at what the McLaren had to do to slightly change its body shape to get its new Mercedes engine into it. So there's a lot of different factors that each team has to work through depending on, again, the specifics and the technical specifications of their specific car, but that they all have to also fall inside the regulations, and they all have to sort of meet these standards. And that's what this future car is this is the next version of the standard, let's say. So if you go online and see it, it's got a really cool livery.
Great livery. So like iridescent, like. Rainbow colors.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to see more of that on the track. A little more fun with the liveries would be fun. Yeah, why not? Think of hockey goalie helmets. They're fun. They're personalized.
Well, that's why the drivers get their own helmets.
True. Yeah, that's true. It's hard to see when they're zooming by at 250 clicks.
True.
Or miles rather. Okay, well, that's fun. And I'm excited to see all that next year. But until then, we'll prepare for the next race here at Silverstone.
Are you feeling hungry? Busy Bee Vegan is a plant-based meal prep service offering pre-made, delicious, and healthy plant-based meals to the Greater Toronto Area. Whether you're curious about plant-based vegan eating, looking to improve your overall health and wellness, or simply too busy to cook, Busy Bee is for you. Their plans are focused on eating clean without sacrificing taste and contributing to a healthy planet. They have made it super simple. Choose and order your meals from the multiple plans they offer, and they will deliver your meals in environmentally friendly compostable containers right to your door. You can find them on Instagram at Busy Bee Vegan Meals or on Facebook at Busy Bee Vegan. Go check out a small local business in Toronto and save the hassle of COVID grocery shopping and cooking. Let the Busy Bees feed you buzz-worthy meals.
Okay, the British Grand Prix. It's gonna go this Sunday at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time at the Silverstone Circuit. This is a pretty prestigious track. It's got a lot of history here. This is Lewis Hamilton's home race. Lots of guys' home race. George Russell, Lando Norris in the field. And we've got a brand new qualifying. We had qualifying today or yesterday, if people are listening to this podcast, which set the track for this brand new sprint qualifying that is bound to be fun. I mean, I don't really know. I don't think anybody really knows what this is going to be. Have they ever done this before? And could you also explain to the people who don't understand, what is this sprint qualifying?
So yeah, they've never done it quite like this. This is a new format. The idea is to, again, try to increase competitiveness. And I think they're also just experimenting with, like any sport, sometimes you got to kind of tinker with the rules to try to mix it up and just see if you can find some new competitive energy in there. So the F1 sprint will be a race run over 100 kilometers. So that's 17 laps in the case of Silverstone. And so it lasts around like 25, 30 minutes, basically. And it's basically just a straight out, no pit stop style race. So yes, they qualified on Friday. We talk about the qualifying in a minute, but they qualified to set the grid for the sprint qualifying on Saturday. So Saturday morning, they'll still do final practice. So the teams will still get time to get out there and tinker with their cars. But the idea here is that they'll be able to sort of just get themselves ready for a sprint. And I think the main thing with the sprint is that they just want to mix it up. Like, you have such different strategy in a, let's say 55 lap or a 62 lap race than you would if you didn't have to worry about pit stops. You could just put your fastest tires on and just flat out go. And I think that what they're trying to play at is the same idea as how there's, different sports have done things like rugby sevens or like cricket 20, or the things where like big, long format sporting events have looked for like new innovative things. This isn't going to replace anything so much as I think they're just trying to find another sort of wrinkle to the weekend. The finishing order for that sprint will then define the grid for Sunday's Grand Prix. So let's say you qualified in 8th on Friday. Traditionally, that's where you would start the Grand Prix. In this case, you have an opportunity to improve your grid standing. So you might, a car that might have just had a bad quali or might struggle in qualifying, but actually drives better in races. And we've seen that over time too. There's some drivers who are better qualifying drivers than they are race drivers. And then there's some guys who just don't qualify well, vice versa. But they can, Daniel Ricciardo's an amazing overtaker. Well, he has no overtaking in qualifying. One of his greatest skills is sort of muted in the place, in that style of thing. Here he has an opportunity to go and pass a couple guys. And think about too, how much excitement and energy the first couple laps of the Grand Prix have, right? Usually the first lap, there's overtakes all over the place because they're coming off the grid and maybe someone didn't get their tires up to temperature on the formation lap. Maybe somebody locks up out of turn 1 or turn 2. And right away, you're getting into a really competitive and exciting start to the race. Then everything starts to spread out. Over time, the faster cars pull away, and then, we get what we usually get. I think the idea here is we're going to truncate all of that. We're going to get a little bit extra fast, aggressive racing, and then we get it twice in the weekend.
So again, repeat how far it is. Is it a full
100
lap?
kilometers?
How many laps is that?
It's 100 kilometers, 17 laps.
Okay.
So the equivalent of about a 30-minute race. So again, most of these Pirelli tires will last about 20 something laps. This is 17 laps. The goal, I think, here is they're not looking for pit stops unless you've got some bodywork damage or something. Let's say there's a little bit of contact in lap 1, then you might have to see some pitting. But the idea here is that they can just flat out go.
That's fun. That's exciting. You mentioned if somebody finishes in 8th, we know now that George Russell is on the grid at 8th, which is really impressive, I think, just behind Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris. We did see Lewis Hamilton beat out Max Verstappen to finish first in this qualifying. Now, is it every single? Is it all 20 or is it just the 10?
Yes, no, all 20 get to race. So there's opportunities for the guys who didn't make it out of, quali 1 to improve. Guys like Tsunoda, who just got beat out there by a couple hundredths of a second. He was in 16th out behind Stroll. He's got an opportunity to start Sunday ahead of Stroll or maybe ahead of Grosjean. not Grosjean.
Giovinazzi.
That's what I meant to say. I saw the GI in the list, but
Yeah.
but yeah, just some of those cars that, you know, middle of the pack guys. But also, this is going to really make a difference up at the top. Hamilton just edged out Verstappen to take pole for this sprint. He's got to defend that now and hold on to that if he wants to start on pole come Sunday. Guys like Bottas have an opportunity to jump up and try to make it harder on the Red Bulls. Leclerc snuck in there in the middle there, pushed Perez back down to 5. And we talked about Ricciardo earlier. Look, he and Norris were right there neck and neck together, 6 and 7 to qualify. So Ricciardo had a good outing, at least almost as good as Norris. And so it'll be interesting to see if they can improve too. But the guy, again, that coming out of qualifying for me, and this will be one of the stories because he's another one of the Brits. 8th place, the highest Russell has ever qualified. It's fantastic, and he has an opportunity to really put that Williams in an awesome place come Sunday. If he can get up ahead of one of those McLarens, or heaven forbid something even crazier happens ahead of them, and maybe a couple guys have a bad start, he could be finding himself in the top 5 to start Sunday for the first time in his career as a Williams driver, I should say. Yeah. And that would be awesome, right? So yeah, that's, I think, the competitiveness that they were hoping they would get from this. The other thing I just mentioned really quickly, because I didn't say that when we were talking about the sprint, this also, there's points on the line. So the top 3 finishers in the sprint will also get points. So first place will get 3 points, second place gets 2, and third place gets an extra point for the drivers' championship. So, let's say
just for qualifying,
Lando Norris, just for finishing the top 3, there won't be a podium or anything like that.
Right.
But the idea being that there's still valuable points in the line, especially if you're one of those guys who, is in a chase position or something come near the end of the season, and you're looking to finish 3rd or 4th or 5th or something. This could really matter. You look right now at the drivers championship, and a guy like Lando Norris, he's only 3 points behind Sergio Perez. Let's say he wins the sprint, he's up in 3rd place in the drivers championship, and that could be huge for him down the line. A guy like Carlos Sainz is chasing his teammate Leclerc. Leclerc's got a 2-point lead on him. 2 points, 3 points can make a big difference in terms of where you finish on this table. Usually the guys up in 1 or 2 are so far ahead, no one's catching them. Yep. But down in the middle of this, and trust me, these guys are all uber competitive, and it matters to them each year where they finish as individual drivers. They care a lot, and so every point matters.
So that's definitely an incentive and advantage. What could go wrong here? Now, if we see an accident or some sort of collision, did they still have time to fix the car? Is the car out? Obviously, it'd be out of qualifying if it's not able to continue driving. But, is it like qualifying where if they have the ability to be able to fix the car, it can make it to the grid? Or I feel like there's a little more danger when it comes to being able to actually make it to the race.
Yeah, so there's a little bit more wiggle room, I think, this weekend than in traditional weekends. I'm not exactly sure of all of the rules. Parc Ferme is the name of the term that they use for basically avoiding moving specific parts of a car in and out between qualifying and racing. They have to basically run the same car or the equivalent of the same car they qualify when it comes to the race. That's the rule. That's what we saw when Leclerc, for example, couldn't start the Monaco Grand Prix. Right. He would have had to take a penalty had he changed out his gearbox, and so instead they tried, and of course he wasn't able to get through the formation lap that day. So allowances have been made for like power unit and gearbox cooling adjustments should the ambient temperature change or something like that. Like there's basic stuff that they're going to allow teams to make a little bit more, or give them a little bit more leeway in terms of making sure their car is still competitive for Sunday, let's say, because they've been racing as opposed to just qualifying. But yeah, I think that's what we have to sort of look forward to, and it should be exciting. I hope that it is as dramatic as they anticipate it will be. We're going to see, I think, 2 more of these this season. But we'll see. I'm not sure which the other ones are. I don't even know if they've announced them. I think there's some rumors that Monza might be the other one that's going to get one of these sprints in it. I don't believe they've announced it, but we'll find out. But yeah, no, they're calling it the 2021 Crypto.com Sprint Series. So I think, again, they're just trying to mix it up and make something a little bit more interesting and see if it works. And if they like it, we'll probably start to see them a lot more. It'll be interesting to see what the drivers think. I know there was a lot of grumbling and mumbling, as there always are when things change, because there's traditionalists, and there's also just sort of like, these drivers are, again, very competitive, and they don't want anything to get in the way of a chance to win a Grand Prix.
Sure, but I mean, like you said, this is for the fans. This sport, all sports, I think, are for the fans. And you see this kind of thing happen in the NBA when they introduced the play-in tournament. There was a lot of backlash,
which I believe is coming back
from the players. But you're right, the NBA has decided.
Just approve that today?
Yeah. That's right. I think it's important. It's not always. It doesn't always seem fair, but you're giving more opportunity for competition for more teams, and I think that's what we need to see when you've got a 20 car grid. You want to see more competition. You want to see more opportunity, and everyone loves to cheer for underdogs. It doesn't mean that we're going to see necessarily, Alfa Romeo compete for a podium, but if there was a race that we saw Alfa Romeo, make it to the 4, 5, 6, that's really exciting, and it's good for the sport. And so it'll be great to see how this turns out for qualifying, and if they decide that it's something that they think they can continue to introduce into more races. Final predictions. What are we going to see? Who are we going to see on the podium? Not after the qualifying sprint, but after our Silverstone British Grand Prix.
Well, I'm only going to give you one name because I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay.
But I'm very confident that, barring some car issue, Lewis Hamilton looked unbelievable in qualifying, and I think they're looking for a bounce back. If they're going to make this a season, make it competitive without letting Verstappen just run away with it, this is going to be the weekend to turn it around. We had a very dramatic race here last season, if you remember, both Mercedes finishing without all 4 tires intact, but they both finished.
That was an awesome race.
Yeah, it was. And I think Lewis Hamilton loves this track. He's got a full grandstand there. British fans losing their minds, back to racing. It means a lot to those guys. I think Lewis Hamilton's going to win it.
All right. My prediction, I'll give you one name as well. That's Yuki Tsunoda, and I'm going to predict that he finishes in top 10. Not in podium, but I'm going to say he finishes top 10. Nice. Now, I've been dreadfully wrong before, but I am ever the optimist. So let's see what happens. It should be a fun one. Silverstone Circuit, 8 a.m. this Sunday, the British Grand Prix. Thanks, everybody.
Qualifying tomorrow.
Tomorrow, 8 a.m. as well. So much fun. I imagine you can find the time if you look it up. Check your local stations, set your PVR. Thanks everybody for listening. Tune in to our other podcast if you've got the time. Every Monday it comes out, HatTrick Sports. You can follow us on Instagram and other platforms, I'm sure. Subscribe on all of the places you find your podcast. And this was Pit Stop. The Pit Stop podcast is presented by HatTrick Sports and is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. The show is produced by Jordan and Braydon Dowler-Coltman each week, but mainly Jordan. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for listening. The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.